In today's video, we are going to look at how to multiply and divide integers. Before we do that though, I just wanted to take a minute to remind you that it's really important that we are going over our mental math, especially if you're around the grade 9 level, so about 14 years old or so, give or take. So if you aren't comfortable with your times tables yet, I recommend downloading an app on your phone or on your tablet, on your parents' phone or tablet, and just playing a multiplication and division app for 5 to 10 minutes a day when you're waiting for something. And over the course of a couple weeks, you'll get a lot stronger and feel a lot better. If you know of any good apps, comment in the comment section below, and maybe we can share those ideas with everybody else. Okay, so in today's video, we're going to be looking at questions like this. Now, multiplying and dividing when signs don't come into play, hopefully that's okay for you. And again, that's where the mental math part kind of comes in. So today we're going to focus on what happens if you do have signs like this, negative and a positive, negative and a negative, negative and positive. What do we do? So I'm going to go over the rule with you first, and then we'll go back up and we'll take a look at these questions. So the rule is going to be if the two integers that you're either multiplying or dividing together, and we're going to see that the rules are actually the same, if they're multiplied together and they have the same sign. So for example, if I have a negative integer multiplied, if I have a negative, there we go. If I have a negative integer multiplied by a negative integer, or if I have a positive multiplied by a positive, what we're going to end up with is our final answer will be positive. Okay, so if it's the same signs, final answer is positive. If the signs are different signs, so for example, one's a plus, one's a minus, or one's a minus, one's a plus, then what we end up there with is our final answer will be negative. Okay, so if they're different signs, our final answer is going to be negative. So in other words, when I'm doing questions like 1 and 2, I can figure out the number part and ignore these signs. So for example, imagine I was just looking at 3 times 6. Well, 3 times 6, according to our mental math, is going to be 18. But then what do I do with these two symbols? Well, I say, well, both symbols are the same sign, which means my final answer is going to be a positive. Now, we usually don't have to write the positive, but I'm going to write that there just for emphasis. So moving on to the next question, I have, again, I'm going to ignore the sign for now. I'm going to do 7 times 3, which gives me 21. And now because the signs are different, over here, because my signs are different, one's a plus and one's a minus, I know that my final answer is going to have a negative sign. So I'm going to go ahead and put a negative sign right in front of it. Now I do want to pause for a second, and I want to be very clear. Sometimes what we get mixed up with is, for a question like this, sometimes people see it as a subtraction question. So just be careful. The difference here is that I've got a bracket, and so it says 7 times whatever's in that bracket. Now sometimes we have other questions that look kind of like 7 plus a negative 3, so I do still have a bracket, but that's one where if you'd watched the last video, we would say, let's get rid of this, that you could turn that entire bubble into a subtract. So just be careful, because these are not the same thing as this question. So if you're having a bit of trouble, take a minute to make sure you can see the difference between multiplication versus addition and subtraction, and we'll give you some practice with that at the end of the video as well. Okay, so that's for multiplication. What about for division? For division, it's extremely similar. So I'm actually going to say, maybe let's see, do I have space? No, we'll do it here. I'll say same rule or same rules for division. So in other words, if I have a negative divided by a negative, or I have a positive divided by a positive, positive divided by a positive, these two will give me a positive answer. Now, I do want to show you that we can either write it horizontally with that symbol, or we can always write it as a fraction, some sort of negative number on top and a negative number on the bottom, or a positive and a positive. So for example, I could have -4 divided by -2, and I just wanted you to recognize that that is also a form of division, and so these rules still apply. Okay, and same thing for if the signs are different. So if one's a plus, one's a minus, one's a minus, one's a plus, or again, we could write it this way. Oops. You end up with final answer will be or is negative. Okay, so going up to our last two questions up here, these are division questions, but it's still the same rule. Same sign positive, different signs negative. Okay, so once again, I'm just gonna do the math without the signs. So I'm gonna say, whoops, where did my pointer go? So I'm just gonna look at 14 divided by 2. That's gonna give me 7. And because I have, the signs are different, because the signs are different, my final answer is going to be negative over here. Okay, so I'm going to add that negative sign right here. Over here, because my signs are the same, I know that my final answer is going to have a positive. So again, I don't have to write the positive, but I'm going to write that one there. And I'll deal with the numbers separately. So 14 divided by 2, still 7. Okay, so that's the difference between this question here and that question there. You'll notice the numerical part, or what we call the magnitude, is the same. It's just the sign of the answer went based on these rules here. Okay, so that's the basics of it. You could probably stop the video right here if you kind of understand enough. I'm just going to go a little further, so I'll call this part A. And then for part B, we're going to look at it when division questions are written a little bit more like fractions, because at the high school level, we tend to write them more like fractions than we do side by side like this. So, for example, if I had a question like 20 divided by negative 5, more often than not, you'll see it written this way. So I just want you to recognize that that is still a division question. So how do I do it? I'm still going to do 20 divided by 5, kind of just ignore that negative sign for now. We know that answer is 4. And then we know that because one sign's plus and one is minus, they're different, which means I need a negative sign. So that's just how you would do it if your question was originally written this way. Okay, I could give you another one. So let's say I have 100 divided by 10. Well, if we wanted to rewrite it, we could write it this way. And again, the way we do it is, I'm going to switch the order. I'm going to do the sign first, then the number. I've got a plus and a plus. Both signs are the same, so my final answer is positive. And then 100 divided by 10 is just 10. If I have a question like this, same thing. We need to recognize that this is just a division question. So let me look at the signs. A negative divided by a negative, they're the same sign, so they become a positive. Positive what? Well, 14 divided by 7 gives me 2, so this is going to be a positive 2. Okay, some of you may have learned that if both top and bottoms are negatives, you can cross them out, they become positive. Same thing. All right, let's do a couple more. So for part D, what if I have a question like this? Pause the video if you feel fairly confident. Try it on your own. So a negative and a positive division make a negative answer. 28 divided by 7 gives me 4. Now I want to go over a couple examples with zeros. So over here, and I kind of forgot to mention that, but over here, any number when you multiply it by 0, you'll get an answer of 0. For example, 7 times 0 is 0. Negative 3 times 0 is 0. And you guys are pretty familiar with that. But what about for division? What are the rules for that? So for division, and to prove it, why don't you pause the video and get a calculator. But if I take 0 divided by a number, so in your calculator, you can punch in 0 divided by, and then you pick the number. Hit equals, and what do you get? You should always be getting 0. So when you got 0 divided by a number, you will always equal 0. Okay, but I want to be very clear about this. If I flip it, if I do a number first, then divide it by a 0, well, what do I get? In your calculator, let's just pick any number. Let's say I pick a 7 divided by a 0. What do you get? You should get a math error on your calculator. And there's nothing wrong with your calculator. It's just that this is actually an impossible question. Sometimes people say the answer is infinity or it's undefined, but you will get a math error. So whichever grade you're at, grade 9, you might just be getting introduced to it. Grade 10, 11, 12, make sure you understand the difference between these two. Okay, so we've gone over the basics. Again, you can stop the video here if you'd like, or if you want to stick around, I'm going to put a few questions here that you can try. Okay, so these are some questions that you can try. Question 1, A through I. Why don't you write your answer on a scrap piece of paper? And when you think you're done, you can come back and check. Okay, I've got answers down here. So once you think you're done, come on back and I'm going to open up these answers. All right, so I'm assuming you've tried them and you're done. Check all of your answers. If any of them were wrong, if you didn't get the right one, just go back to our notes to see if you can understand why you're wrong. And you could even maybe put a star beside them so that you can look over it again another day. If those made sense to you, I have a second set of questions you can try. And just be careful, because for some of these questions, it's actually not just multiplication and division. I have added some addition, some subtraction, some multiplication, and some division. So I'm mixing in concepts from our integers video number 1. So if you haven't watched that yet, that might be helpful, but many of you can do it anyway. So pause the video. I would encourage you to try this as well, just to make sure that you can tell the difference between addition and subtraction questions and multiplication and division, because sometimes they look really similar. All right, if you're still listening, I'm assuming you've done the questions and you're looking for your answers. Here they are. So this here is actually an addition question where we would take these double signs and turn that into a plus. This is just a subtraction question. And hopefully you're seeing that these are multiplication questions because there's the integer and then there's a bracket right beside it. Again, integer, bracket right beside it. As opposed to a question like this where I have an integer, then I have a subtract sign before my bracket. If this was going to be a multiplication question, it would have to be written this way. Again, integer with the bracket right beside it. Hope that helps you tell these questions apart, and good luck with your math. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe.